All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you so much for joining me today. I'm excited for what I'm going to be teaching about and talking about today. So, thank you all so much for joining me. I'm just going to wait a moment just to make sure you guys can see me, hear me okay. So, if you could put in the chat if I'm live and all is good. Sometimes it's hard to tell on my end, even though like it says it's live. And so it's always helpful to get that confirmation from you guys. It's a beautiful Saturday here in Colorado. We had a quite a gloomy, rainy fall day yesterday, but today it is clear and sunshiny and just beautiful. Oh, thank you so much. Great sound. So that lets me know we're good to go. So let's get started. So I'm going to, in case this is your first time joining a live stream with me, what I like to do is I have a couple different topics that I want to talk about today and a couple different things I want to get into. So how I do this is I'll talk and teach about one topic, and then I might look through the chat and just see if there's any questions that would be helpful for me to answer. Sometimes I'll be honest, guys, the chat gets going and it can be challenging to read through it, and it can be a little overwhelming. And sometimes my eyes don't grab the questions. So, but I will do my best in that, and I'll talk on. I've got two segments today. And I will talk for about 15 minutes or so on each segment, just so you kind of know what to expect and the time frame of today's live show. So the first topic that I want to talk about is a question that I get often. So both topics today are common questions that I receive. And the first question is, why are women so unhappy? Why are we so unhappy? And why do we have such unhealthy relationship with ourselves? A woman commented on a video that I posted yesterday about my husband yells at me. Is he a narcissist? And if you haven't had a chance to watch that, please go watch that. It's an important video that I did. And a woman commented on that, asking this very question: why are women so unhappy? And her thought was that she thinks it comes and stems from having an unhealthy relationship with our fathers. And I want to address that. So we're going to talk about that. And then another question that I get frequently in the comments of my videos, and that I've actually gotten a stream of emails this week from good men wanting to know: how do I share my videos? How do I share your content with my wife? And oftentimes from a place of, how do I share this with my wife without her getting angry and upset and bashing me? So we're going to dive into that. And I'm going to answer that question, but also go a little bit deeper about what good men want to look for, and why sharing my content with your wives is a good test to see who you are married to and what you can expect and anticipate or not expect from your wife. So that's where we're going today. I'm excited, and let's get started. So the first place I want to go and answer is, why are women so unhappy? Why do we have such unhealthy relationships with ourselves? And for the women watching, how you can know that you are unhappy, and how I define being unhappy isn't a feeling. It's not the circumstances of your life. Being unhappy is having an unhealthy relationship with yourself. And how we can know as women that we have an unhealthy relationship with ourselves, and this is what I had to see for me, is that we beat ourselves up. We don't feel like we're enough. We are highly, highly critical of ourselves. We often become who we believe we need to be to get the acceptance of others, to be liked and validated by others. We feel a sense of emptiness in us, that no matter what we do in life, whether we get married, we have kids, we have a career, that it's never enough. And we're constantly searching for that next thing. We often hit a point of waking up one day and thinking, is this it? Is this going to be my life? We question who we are and feel like we don't have a sense of self. These are the benchmarks to know you have an unhealthy relationship with yourself. And that's the experience of being unhappy. It's the very unhealthy relationship that we have with ourselves that then causes us to have an unhealthy relationship with our husband and causes us to have unhealthy relationships with the other people in our lives. So the common thinking, and this was my thinking too, the common thinking is it's daddy issues, that it's issues with our father, and then we didn't have a healthy relationship with our father. So that's the first place I want to go in this. Is that it? Is that the root cause of why women are so unhappy and have such an unhealthy relationship with ourselves? The short answer, absolutely not. And here I want to set up just a little bit of framework for you, because this is the perspective that I live in my life and that I teach my students and clients that I work with. There's two camps. We can either live in a camp, which is our modern day psychological framework and what we hear in therapy, which is that we are a victim of our circumstances, that it's our past, our upbringing, our relationship with our dad, our relationship with our mothers that causes us to be insecure, have low self-esteem, not be able to be confident in ourselves and navigate life as a healthy adult. I call that the camp of being a victim. And that's the camp that I lived in for a long time. I went to therapy. I'm 40 now. I'll be 40 in November. I went ahead and made the leap. I'm 40 now. And I went to, in my late 20s, in a year of my 30s, when I was 30, I went to therapy for about 6 or 7 years. And the story that got enforced and that I shared and told and bought into, and then my therapist, well-intentioned, enabled, that it was my relationship with my dad that I had such low self-esteem and that I couldn't navigate life as a competent adult. And that's the camp that I lived in for a long time. I call that camp victim. So we can live there, which camp victim is believing that as women, we have an unhealthy relationship with ourselves. We have self-esteem issues and confidence issues because of our relationship with our fathers. Or we can live in a different camp. And this is the camp that I teach. I am not a therapist. I am a teacher. And the camp that I teach is that as adults, we are a product of our choices. We are a product of our choices. It's the choices and decisions that we have made in our lives that create the very relationship that we have with ourselves and create the very life that we have. And this is the camp that I was blessed to be introduced to by my mentor. And it was life-changing. It was a profound awakening moment, because to recognize that I was a product of my circumstances meant that I was in control and I had a choice to actually change and build a healthy relationship with myself and to change the issues and the problems in my marriage and in my life and in my other relationships. And it was only from that perspective that I could change. So you want to know in all of my videos today and everything we're talking about, that I live and teach this camp, that we are a product of our choices, which means we don't need to get into our past. We don't need to get into our upbringing. We don't need to get into the relationship that we have with our mother or our father. It's looking in the mirror at ourselves and what are the choices and decisions that we have made that have created the very life that we have and the very relationship that we have with ourselves. So that's how I want to answer this question, is from that camp, not anything to do with our past or our upbringing or a relationship that we have with our parents, because there's no solution here. As long as our unhealthy relationship is from an unhealthy relationship with our fathers or anyone else in our past or in our lives, then we have no ability to change, because we need the other person to change or our past to change or our circumstances to change for the experience of ourselves to change. So there's no solution over here. So if it's not our fathers, if it's not our daddy issues, why as women do we have such unhealthy relationship with ourselves? Why are we so unhappy? Why are we so insecure and lack confidence in ourselves? I like to explain it from understanding that men and women are wired differently. And that's why I have a different solution for women and a different solution for men in our relationships and in our marriage. So men and women are wired differently. And there's a photo that I like to use. And it just so happens to say on one side, a husband's brain or a husband's mind, and on the other side, a wife's mind. And I hope that this works. I haven't done this yet on one of my lives, but I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I want to share this picture because it explains it perfectly. And this will set us up to really go into why are women so unhappy? Why do we have an unhealthy relationship with ourselves? And this is it. So on the left side, it says a husband's brain, and it's one track. And then we look at this other picture and it says a wife's brain, and the tracks are going everywhere. We can see lots of stop signs everywhere and barricades and blocks. And this is the difference between men and women. On the left side, at least how I'm looking at it, it's my left side. On the husband's brain or a man's brain, men are pragmatic and they are problem solvers. Men are pragmatic and they are problem solvers. And then on the right side, where it says a wife's brain, or we could substitute and say a woman's brain, the tracks are going every which way. And that's because as women, we are wired to be emotional, highly emotional, and we make ourselves very complex and very complicated beings. And then society and therapy and the books we read and talking to our friends all validate and enable this belief in ourselves that we are highly complex, highly emotional, and complicated. And it is this belief that we are emotional and complex and complicated that we as women have such an unhealthy relationship with ourselves and so unhappy. And we're going to go more in depth into that today. So I'm going to stop my share. I have something else to share here in a moment that we'll get into to make this point even more. But I want to talk about it just a little bit more. So as women, buying into this belief that we are highly emotional causes us to have low emotional intelligence in life, meaning we are not in control of our emotional state. Whereas on the other hand, men are wired to be pragmatic. They're wired to be problem solvers. So they are in the best way simple and move into a solution-oriented way of thinking to find solutions to the problems that come up in life. As women, we've made ourselves so complicated and so complex that we don't go into problem solving. We get trapped and stuck in our emotional state. And we don't realize that that low emotional intelligence, that inability to be in control of our emotional state, feeds our victim stories of why we have low self-esteem, why we can't seem to get ourselves together, why we feel like we don't know who we are, why we feel disconnected or a sense of emptiness in ourselves. And we live life as victims, meaning believing that our experience of ourselves has happened to us, that our life is happening to us, and it's someone or something else like our husbands who are responsible for our unhappiness. And in this place, when we are victims, we can't change. We have no ability to change. And when we allow our external world, like our husband, our marriage, our career, our kids, our family, to be in control of our experience, we give our power away and we have no ability to change. And we stay stuck in having low emotional intelligence. What we don't realize is that it isn't the people and things in our lives that cause our experience. It is the internal experience of ourselves, our internal emotional state, that creates the experience that we have of our different relationships, like our marriage, our career, our kids, etc. That determines the lens and the perspective of which we see and view our lives. And that causes us to live in a very false reality. For example, in our marriages, thinking that our husbands, and in the framework for all of my videos and for my channel, is women being married to good men who are responsible, hardworking, kind, thoughtful, loving, caring, that is their nature. And as women living in low emotional intelligence and putting the power outside of us to the people and things to determine our experience of ourselves, that's where we get caught and constantly blaming our husbands and looking to what is it about them and who they are and how they are showing up or not showing up that's causing the experience that we're having of our marriages and that we're having of ourselves. And again, we get caught in being a victim. And we never realize that it's the unhealthy relationship that we have with ourselves, buying into this myth and idea that we are complex, highly emotional, and that's just how we live our lives, and that's just how we are. That's the very thing driving us to have an unhealthy relationship with ourselves. Because when we are not in control of our emotional state and we are living in low emotional intelligence, we live from an internal state of being sped up, emotional, worried, creating problems in our lives, and living in blame. Which again, from that place, then we can never change. So what happens is we watch ourselves make the same unhealthy choices, have the same unhealthy reactions to life, and we feel very bad about ourselves. And we begin to feel, because we never change, because we're living in victim and putting the power and control outside of ourselves. We never change because it's impossible to change as a victim. So what happens is we watch ourselves make those same unhealthy choices, have those same unhealthy reactions, is we begin to think there's something wrong with us, that there's something about us that we just can't change, and we're defected in some way. And that at the core of that, we feel internally that we are wrong, that who we are is wrong and bad. And when that's our internal state and we feel so bad about ourselves on the inside, then that's the lens and that's the perspective from which we view our relationships and view our lives, that then that internal state drives who we are in our relationships, like our marriage. And there's no capacity to change from that place. So the solution of what us as women need to do to build a healthy relationship with ourselves and to be happy, so that then we can have a happy marriage and a healthy, happy, loving relationship with our husbands, is that we have to learn to develop high emotional intelligence, the ability to be in control of our emotional state, to recognize that our emotional state is coming from us, that it's not happening to us because of our past or our relationship with our dad or from our husband or anything or anyone else in our lives, that it is our response to life that creates our internal emotional state. So we have to learn to be in control of that, which is developing high emotional intelligence. And that's what I teach women how to do in my happiness program, and then in a more advanced way in my Happy Wife program. But the foundation first, before a woman can work on her marriage and work on what I call being a happy wife, we have to have the foundation of being happy within ourselves, meaning knowing how to have a healthy relationship with ourselves, learning how to develop high emotional intelligence and have healthy responses and reactions to life, and be able to see the truth of our husbands in our marriage and to see them as good, to see them as good men, and how they do show up caring and loving and kind. It's only our relationship with ourselves that makes us see it any differently. And what we want to understand is that underneath the complexity that we have built ourselves to be as women, what we want to understand is that is not our true nature. And when we live from that perspective of being not in control of our internal emotional state and having low emotional intelligence, it covers up the true nature of who we are as women. So the beauty is that when we learn to develop high emotional intelligence, we unlock the true nature of who we are internally. And what you will find, and this is what I found for myself, is that we are simple, happy, calm, grounded, genuinely flexible and easygoing, stable, adaptive, soft, kind. And we can live from what I call our woman wisdom, the ability to understand ourselves, the ability to understand how we make issues and challenges complex and project our high emotional state onto situations so that we can catch ourselves and actually train ourselves to go into problem solving and being pragmatic so that we are not reacting to life from a place of not being in control of our emotional state. And what happens when we train ourselves to do that, and we have the capacity, it's already in us. There's nothing we're missing. There's nothing that happened to us as kids or happened to us in our upbringing that would prevent us from being able to be in control of our emotional state. What happens when we live from that place of high emotional intelligence is we begin to feel good about who we are. And we begin to be confident in ourselves. We begin to trust ourselves and learn to navigate life from a place of being pragmatic and from a place of being able to problem solve, which just makes us feel that much better about ourselves because we show ourselves that we are important to ourselves, that we matter, that we already have everything we need within ourselves to be successful and navigate life. And that all comes from being in control of our emotional state. I think it's a really important point to make because when I was going to therapy and when I was also a big spiritual seeker. So I did a lot of different woo-woo healing modalities. And I was a yoga teacher. And all those things kept me very stuck because they weren't leading me to the right places in myself to actually be able to build a healthy relationship with myself. But what happened in all of that is I began to buy into the story of that I was the way that I was because of my upbringing, because of my dad, because of my relationship with my husband or past relationships with men. And I was very, very stuck. But when I learned to develop high emotional intelligence, I began to believe in myself. And I began to realize that it's my choices and decisions that create my internal emotional experience, not what's happening to me. And then I realized that I can navigate life and I can trust myself and I can show up in a way that I'm proud of me, that then everybody else gets the best of me. And that's where my marriage began to change very, very rapidly. Because what happened is that the character of who I am as a person and the integrity that I have as a person became very important to me. And that became the driving force of having high emotional intelligence is who do I want to be? And how do I want to know myself? And the more I began to build that in myself, the more that's where I wanted to live from. And my perspective and lens of my life and my marriage and all of my relationships began to change dramatically. And I began to see the reality of my husband as a good man and how thoughtful and caring and genuine he was. I also began to see the reality of my dad. Because when I was going to therapy and buying into the story, buying into my own story, and then my therapist enabling my story that my dad was the problem in my life, I had a very skewed lens and perspective of my dad, who's an amazing man. My dad's a retired Master Chief from the Navy. So I grew up in a strict household and I was rebellious, which created the dynamics between me and my dad. We did this. And what was beautiful is I began to take responsibility for myself and realize that it was me, that I'm the problem of being unhappy and having an unhealthy relationship with myself. I began to be very grateful for my dad and very grateful for the example he was trying to set for me that I rebelled against so strongly, because my dad was trying to teach me and raise me to have character and raise me to have integrity. But because I was so rebellious and because I didn't feel good about myself on the inside because of the choices I was making, then I put that onto my dad, and it caused us to have a very strange relationship. So it's been a beautiful journey for me as a woman, learning to be in control of my emotional state as a pathway to build high emotional intelligence and be happy. To now see the reality of my dad and the good man that he is and have a healthy relationship with him. And now there was a point I was going to make that I lost track of, so I went a different direction, but it's coming back now, is that being in control of your emotional state is not about stuffing and avoiding. It's not. That's what I thought I needed to do when I was going to therapy, when I was a yoga teacher and doing all the woo-woo, is how do I just remain perfectly calm and at peace and never let myself have a negative emotion. And that was not high emotional intelligence. It didn't solve anything. High emotional intelligence is the ability we have to learn to understand our emotional state, why we're having the reactions we're having, and then we develop the self-awareness to make a different choice. So it's a very conscious process, and it is not about stuffing or suppressing or avoiding. And I think that's a really, really important thing to keep into perspective. So in wrapping up on this topic before we get to the next one, just in summary, it's not our dads that we are so unhappy as women. It's our own relationship with ourselves, and that we haven't been trained to have high emotional intelligence and be in control of our emotional state, which has made us very, very complex beings and living very emotionally. And what I want women to know is we have control over that. And there's another way. The whole purpose for my channel is to support and help women to evolve as women, to evolve, to learn to develop high emotional state so that you can have a completely different experience of yourself and finally really know who you are as a woman and to express yourself as a woman. So, and before I go to the next segment, I'm going to end with a little short clip that also really ties together the differences between men and women, in understanding that as women, we just have to work on different things in ourselves because we're different than men. We're wired differently. So I thought I'd share a little humor before we go to the next topic. So there's no sound to this video, by the way. Let me actually just real quick. Okay. So, oh, I can't do it that way. Thanks for your patience, guys. All right, now I've got it. So I'm just going to show this short little video. It wraps it up well to see the difference between men and women. So as I play this, you've maybe seen this before, but pay attention to the man is on the right and the woman here is on the left. And it's so classic, the differences between us. So watch. So they've got this barrier. Like he goes under just like that. And then look at what we do as women. This cracks me up. And I love the headline down here. It says, "There's nothing simple with women." There sure isn't. There sure isn't. Oh my goodness. And then this is great. Instead of going, then she hops up over the bar. Oh my goodness. So that, just wrapping up that topic. Oh, isn't that great? Just like us. So thank you so much. I'm going to take just a quick look, just to see if there's anything. Oh my goodness, lots going on in the chat. Oh, and by the way, guys, please take a second to like the video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. George Bruto, thank you so much for being here today. It's nice to have you. And Mona, thank you so much for being here every week to see if yeah, so that's a good comment. That believing that the past is relevant and that we can't show up as our best self until we deal with the issues that made us who we are and were as a child. And I understand and that perspective because I lived from that for a long time. And for me, so I was diagnosed just to share, I was diagnosed with PTSD and bipolar in my 20s. Um, and as a result of breaking away from the model of believing that it was my past and my upbringing, I don't have PTSD. I don't have bipolar. And it was only when I was able to shift perspectives. What we have to realize is it's just two totally different perspectives. That it's one way, and our culture and therapy reinforces it, that it's our past and our upbringing that creates us to be who we are. And that's where I lived for a long time. And I was very stuck in my mental health issues from that perspective. There was no solution. And the way that, well, and so it wasn't until I switched to a perspective and being presented with an option. I think that was the biggest gift to me, is that I never knew there was an option. I never knew there was any other option to view myself and who I was and how I experienced my life. And then I got a different context to recognize as a grown-up adult that I am where I am in my life based on my choices and decisions was incredibly freeing. And it was the only path out. And when that spoke to me, because I had been doing the loop and the circles of dealing with my past and my upbringing, and as a woo-woo person, my past lives. And I was just very stuck going around in circles. And then it wasn't until I was presented with another option, which these options don't collide. They are two separate paths in life, that gave me the framework to make a different choice and to begin just looking at myself. And yes, looking at who I had been in the past, independent of my upbringing and my childhood, to see who was Karen and what were the choices Karen was making all along that was creating the unhealthy relationship with myself. And then from that place, I could begin to understand myself just in me by looking at myself in the mirror. And that, I get the question a lot of times, man, that's a tough pill to swallow. And it can seem like that, but it really wasn't. It was a huge awakening and a huge breaking away from the trap that I had been in, that I didn't know there was another option. So I understand that perspective and feeling we need to deal with our past. But I learned to deal with my past very differently by just looking at myself and when did I know the difference between right and wrong for me? And when was I responsible for my choices that then began to create my life and the very experience of myself? And that was so empowering, because then I could actually change. As long as I thought it was my dad or my upbringing, there was no ability to change. Sure, I could get some understanding and it helped to an extent, but there was no solution because that wasn't the actual problem. The actual problem was me. And that was freeing. And there was a part of me craving that because I wanted to change and I wanted to get unstuck. So, all right. So I'm going to move to the next segment. Again, thank you guys so much for being here. And thank you, Mona. Mona's my teacher in my lives these past few weeks, because I'm not used to saying, hey, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe. So please do that. And please share this if you know anybody who could benefit from it. So let's get into the next topic. I'm excited about this one. I'm always excited about all of them. This is fun to be here with you guys, and teaching is what I love to do the most. So, okay. So the common question, like I said, I got a few emails this week from good men asking, how do I share your videos with my wife? How do I introduce her to you? I'm not quite sure how to do that. So Great question. And here's what I want good men to know about this. So for this segment, I'm speaking to the men. It's a good thing. It's a good thing to share my videos with your wife and to know there's no certain way to do that. There's no way to soften it or make it easier for your wife, because that's what good men want to do, is how do I do this and do it in an approachable way? And what you want to realize is that sharing my videos or sharing my content with your wife is actually, it's a test in a good way, in a constructive sense of the word. And that's what I want to get into. It's a test because if you want to be prepared, you want to prepare yourself so that you are taking responsibility for your choice and what that might entail, sharing my videos with your wives, that you're walking into the lion's den. When you share my videos with your wife, you are walking into the lion's den. You want to be prepared that you might get blasted, and that is probable and likely, and to not shy away from that, but to find that strength within yourself to walk into the lion's den knowing you might get blasted, and for a constructive reason, to use it as a test. Because if your wife gets upset with you and highly triggered, then that's going to show you the truth and the reality of your wife. That if she gets upset, she gets triggered, she blasts you, then you can begin to, and she doesn't come around. Sometimes you might share and she might get upset and she might get triggered, but then she might come around. She might come around and go, oh, wait a second. Because some women have a knowing within themselves, oh, if that can get me so upset, that might mean there's some truth in here that I need to look at. I've heard that from many women that I have worked with over the years. But if you get blasted and upset, you can begin to know what camp your wife is in, whether she is open-minded and wants to change and wants to look at herself, or the other camp, that she's closed-minded, and that as much as she wants you to change and for you to look at yourself and you to come to couples counseling, that she is not actually interested in changing, and she's not interested in looking at herself. And that's something that I teach good men to do, is that in order to be able to navigate your relationship with your wife in a way where you can rebuild and regain your sense and your strength of being a man, the only way to do that is to be in the reality of your marriage. So if you share my videos and your wife gets very upset and she's not open-minded to seeing your experience and what you experience with her in the relationship, that allows you to have choice and to begin to like I said, to take your power back in a constructive way. And if you are choosing to stay with your wife, knowing who she is, that she's not interested in changing, she's not interested in looking at herself, what that allows you to begin to do is to begin to accept her more and to focus on the good things about her that you love and adore, and to accept that she's always going to want you to change, but she's not willing to look at herself. And this is very common in the men that I work with. And why it's so important for good men to begin to understand the reality of their wife and whether or not she wants to change is that you have to begin to break out of the delusion that your wife has caught, that your wife creates in the marriage, that you are the problem. Because the challenging piece for good men is you begin to buy into your wife's story about you, that you don't listen, that you're disengaged, that you don't show up for her, that you don't care, that you don't appreciate her, that you're absent from the relationship or absent from being a good dad. And you begin to buy into the case that she's building against you of who you are. And then good men disconnect and lose sight of who they are as good men. So you have to break through that delusion to figure out the truth of the woman you are with, not to make her wrong or bad, but to empower yourself to navigate the relationship from reality instead of the false reality that your wife has created and indoctrinated you into. Again, good men believe their wives and fall into the manipulation that there is something wrong with you. So one of the first steps of regaining your strength is to be able to reconnect with yourself as a good man and begin to see through the web and the delusion that your wife has created in the relationship that you are the problem. And so how you might present my videos is to say that I've been listening to this woman and watching her videos, and I see a lot of and hear a lot of truth of our relationship and what she's talking about. And would you sit down and watch this video with me so you can understand how I'm feeling in the relationship? And what you want to understand as good men is that's the very thing your wife asks you to do, and dragging you to couples counseling or having you read a book or having you read articles or learn to speak her love language. And so it's a very good test that if she's willing to sit down and say, oh my goodness, and watch one of my videos with you, and oh my goodness, I didn't understand this is how you are feeling. She might say, I need a little bit with this. I'll get back to you, because she might take a minute and need to come around. Or she'll make you wrong and say, I'm not like this. How could you think this was me? And then you begin to know the reality of who your wife is. So again, you're not living in that false reality. And from that place of understanding who your wife is, I want to remind you that you didn't get the wrong woman. You got a woman. And on a spectrum, as women, because of how we're wired and what I was talking about earlier, we haven't learned to develop high emotional intelligence. We don't feel good about ourselves. We have an unhealthy relationship with ourselves. And then we project that onto you as our husbands, that on a spectrum, all women are emasculating, some very, very emasculating, some on the lower end, some in the middle. So I want you to understand you didn't get the wrong woman. And over the years of working with good men, it's become very apparent to me that good men, in spite of how they are treated by their wives, still love and adore their wives, unless things have gotten to a certain point and the relationship is beyond a place of it being able to be healthy and constructive. Good men love and adore their wives in spite of her emasculating ways. So most good men that I have worked with choose to stay and learn to manage the relationship from a place of understanding their wives and understanding they're not going to change and understanding their tactics and manipulation, so that they're not giving their power away and they can remain strong and remain a solid sense of who they are and not buy into their wife's stories and blame and manipulation of them. And you begin to rebuild yourself and take back your power from your wife in a constructive way, simply by seeing the reality of who she is and that she doesn't want to change. Or you get lucky and you realize that maybe she is open to my videos, and she is open to looking at herself in this way. And you hit the jackpot. And from that place, I like to share with men, and I teach this in my men's relationship course, that there's one of four things that will happen as you begin to take your power back in a constructive way, and you begin to rebuild yourself, and you begin to learn to not buy into your wife's emasculation and manipulation. One of four things can happen. The first is your wife begins to realize that her games are not going to work, and she realizes she needs to look at herself and how she's showing up. And by you taking your power back and working on yourself to no longer allow her to emasculate you, then she'll choose to change. I will be honest, that's a rare one that happens. The second thing that can happen is you begin to constructively take back your power and learn to navigate the relationship in a way where the emasculation is bouncing off. Is she might say, I don't like this. I don't like who you're becoming. And she will leave. The third thing that could happen is as you begin to change and see if your wife is going to respond to you and also change, you might decide this isn't the relationship for me and I no longer want to be a part of this relationship and be emasculated and treated poorly by my wife. The fourth thing that can happen is you understand the reality of your relationship with your wife and who she is and how she shows up. And it's not your wife, it's that she's a woman. And you choose to learn to navigate the relationship knowing who she is and learn to use her emasculation as a gift to help you see the weaknesses within yourself that allows you to be emasculated. And you learn to manage and navigate the relationship. Most good men that I work with fall into that fourth category. And it's because they have children, they have responsibilities. And as good men, you're committed and you want to take responsibility for the commitment that you made. And that in spite of your wife's emasculating behaviors, you can still see the good things about her and you still adore her and love her and you want to make it work. And that is often, that fourth is often what good men I have worked with. That's typically the category they fall into. And what begins to happen is that instead of being a victim to the emasculation, but first men are literal victims. Good men are literal victims because they don't understand what's happening and they buy into their wife's story. And so they are a victim of her emotional abuse. When a good man comes through my relationship course, I pull back the curtain and help them see the reality of what's happening. And once they have see the reality, then it's up to them. That's up to them to no longer be emasculated by their wives, by how they show up and how they learn to not buy into what's happening. And what oftentimes happens is then the emasculation begins to bounce off and it might even lessen because again, a wife might realize, oh, my games and tricks aren't going to work anymore. But the key is after a good man realizes what's happening in his relationship, the key is to not be a victim and to recognize I'm making a choice. I understand what's happening now and I'm making the choice to be here. So how do I navigate it in a way for me where I can remain strong in myself, feel good about myself, and no longer buy into the emasculation and manipulation of my wife? And from that place, you can learn to navigate the relationship and be happy. And you begin to see and focus on the good things about your wife and you accept the not so good things about your wife. So in short, sharing the videos is a good test to see the reality of your wife and whether or not she is willing to change. So I encourage you to do so, but be prepared. Go into it knowing that you might get blasted so that when that happens, that you can begin to actually build that muscle to be in high emotional intelligence to understand, okay, this is her. And now I understand the truth. And that's a wonderful test. Or you might get lucky and she might watch a video with you and go, oh my gosh, thank you. This is a tough pill to swallow, but I didn't realize that this is how you're feeling. And this is really something to consider and look at. And then she might want to work with me or take my course to learn to be happy in herself and develop high emotional intelligence. So you want to go into it prepared, but then just use it as a test, as a way to begin to rebuild a new reality of the relationship. And that's, again, where you're going to take your power back and learn to use your wife's emasculation as your greatest teacher to see the weaknesses in yourself that allows you to be emasculated by her and begin to rebuild your sense of strength. So that those are the two topics today. I am going to take another quick look just through the chat really quick. Again, thank you guys so much. Um, oh yeah, I can hear my wife now. Of course, you want me to watch her video. She's on your side. So again, thank you for the comment. And then it's everything I've been talking about. Then you realize, okay, this is the reality. I think sharing the videos with the wife is the first real step to shaking things up and also gaining strength, growing, healing, taking your agency back. Good for you, Jack. That's exactly it. So thank you guys so much for being here. Remember to like and the video, subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching and being here with me today. I'm gonna go off and join my husband and have a nice Saturday here. I think we're gonna watch the CSU game tonight. I'm excited about Deion Sanders being the coach and what he's doing and shaking things up over there. So I hope whatever you're doing today, wherever you are, that you enjoy yourself. And I will see you again very soon.